Why would a God who tells us to love our neighbor test someone for loving too much? That's a question that chapter 2 left me with. And it took me more than a week and something happening in my personal life to get anywhere close to an answer. Before we get there, let's talk about chapter 2 of The Pursuit of God. This chapter is called The Blessedness of Possessing Nothing, and it dives deeper into sacrifice and revolves around the concept of renunciation. It's about letting things go, surpassing the human desire to possess and surrendering everything to God. Tozer begins this chapter with the creation story. In Genesis, God created man in a world of useful, pleasant things for man's sustenance and delight. Now, these things were always meant to stay outside or external of man, for inside was a shrine made specifically for God. Well, sin happened, and that order flipped. As per Tozer's words, these things have suddenly become usurpers, moving in and fighting for a throne that was never meant to be contested. In simple terms, man has become possessive and have grown to have hearts that learn to grip or hold on to these things. He even says that the roots of our hearts grow down into these things and we don't dare pull one out because it would feel like it would kill us, or it feels like it would kill us. But Christ's answer to that grip is the cross. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever shall save his life shall lose it, and whosoever shall lose his life for my sake shall find it. Tozer says that within each of us is an enemy characterized by possessiveness called the self-life. Hold on to this enemy and you lose everything. Let it go and you actually keep what matters. To highlight this, Tozer proceeds with the story of Abraham, particularly with the story or the sacrifice of Isaac. Now, if you're not familiar with this story, this is essentially how it goes. Abraham is the model of faith throughout Scripture. He's known for obeying and trusting God fully, and as such was promised a great nation, and that all the families of earth would be blessed through him. For the longest time, however, he and his wife were childless, and it wasn't until he was 100 years old that he came to have a son, Isaac, which essentially was the proof that God's promise was real. Now, as one would expect, Abraham grew to love his son so much. So much so that God commented upon the strength of his affection, until that love became what Tozer called bordering upon the perilous. It was then that God said to Abraham, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering on a mountain." A command to sacrifice his beloved son. Now, of course, Abraham wrestled with this thought, and he did so alone throughout the night. And by morning, decided to go through with it, trusting God fully. Then God just let him get all the way to the point of no return before eventually stopping him, saying, "I never intended that you should actually slay the lad. I only wanted to remove him from the temple of your heart that I might reign and challenge there." And so Isaac lives, and God renews the promise to Abraham, bigger than before. And Tozer describes Abraham standing there afterward as a man who possessed nothing, yet had everything. The flock, his wife, Isaac, all still his. Only now, none of it owned him back. That's it. A perfect story of renunciation. Well, I didn't find it that way, at least initially. In fact, I would go on to say that I found the story quite repulsive. The actual test that God gives Abraham just seemed barbaric to me. Take your son and sacrifice him. All this because God deemed Abraham's love for Isaac has in a way overtaken him as his center. This to me felt less like correction and more like jealousy. Because why would someone be tested for loving? Especially when we're told to love our neighbors the way that God has loved us. So, like, which is it? Do we love fully or don't? Because loving too much might get something taken from you. It just feels so counterintuitive. And as with the first chapter, this second one drove me to look for answers. Like, why does God even test us at all? And most of the answers I found, I just didn't feel were satisfying. For instance, it's usually said, or well, people online usually say that we're tested so we can grow, so that we can determine if our faith is real. Well, it's strange to me that the moment we actually choose to seek God is the same moment our faith is shaken. Like, to err is human. That's not controversial, and that's just true. So why does choosing to follow mean getting tested for it? Like, is this how faith is determined? Like, it's not real until it's survived the test or something like this. And honestly, I don't think the chapter answers that one. It does answer the jealousy bit, though, through a specific line from the story. But before we get into that, I do want to make a call back into one of my questions from the previous chapter, for I think this chapter does answer that. If you haven't watched, I ask whether pursuing God means giving up on the ordinary enjoyment of life, and if I have to stop enjoying things to take this pursuit seriously. Well, there's a section in this chapter that I think addresses that. Tozer at one point asked, I have said that Abraham possessed nothing, yet was not this poor man rich? After all, Abraham kept everything. Again, he kept his flock, his wife, Isaac, all safe beside him. Nothing was taken. What changed for him was internal, not external. So no, pursuing God doesn't mean giving up the good things in my life. It just means that those things don't get to sit where only God belongs. I can still enjoy them fully for what they are. I just don't get to depend on keeping them or making them the center of my life. So yeah, enjoy. But yeah, now back to my other question regarding jealousy. I never intended that you actually slay the lad. I only wanted to remove him from the temple of your heart, that I might reign unchallenged there. I wanted to correct the perversion that existed in your love. It was never about Isaac dying. It was about what Isaac had come to occupy. Well, that's a text's own answer. It wasn't that Abraham loved Isaac too much, but Isaac had quietly become the thing Abraham's whole faith was resting on. It wasn't jealousy, but God making sure that Abraham's faith stood on him directly. At least that's the theory. I didn't fully understand it until something happened to me personally. See, very recently, I thought of someone as an answered prayer. She was a believer, and her faith was strong. And it's actually because of her that I'm reading this book. And more than that, it was because of her that I started praying again and that I'm trying to reconnect with God. And as cringe as it might sound, I for sure thought that she was the one. I was ready to give myself to that fully. I think, without fully realizing it, I'd built her into something more than she was ever meant to be. A center. Now, I'm not saying that she was a mistake. In fact, I'm grateful to and for her. But the whole time we were in contact, I just kept asking myself, was I doing any of this praying and reaching back toward God for Him? Or was I doing it for her approval, for her validation, so that she'd accept me? Well, turns out things didn't actually matter. Well, that didn't actually matter because things didn't just work out. She ended it while I was actually reading this chapter. And it felt weird, honestly. Initially, initially it felt um, initially I felt calm, as if I had just come to accept it for some reason. But then in that calmness, I just felt like something subconscious got triggered. And suddenly there was this pull toward the darkness that I was familiar with, and a voice telling me to disappear. From being calm, I suddenly felt like I was going to spiral. And I knew it wasn't right, even as I was feeling it. So instead of running away, I sat with it and I actually prayed. I guess that is if you consider screaming internally or, yeah, asking God questions in a fit of rage as prayer. But I just kept asking, why me? Why again? Why does this keep happening? And why must I love only to end up being broken by it? And somewhere in the middle of that anger, I just randomly said, if this is how it's supposed to be, then I accept. And that was the whole turn. For some reason, after that, I just felt calm. And it's funny because I don't think it was God resolving anything or resolving what I was asking Him. It was just me finally doing, in some small, broken, and I guess human way, exactly what this chapter is about. Letting go of something I'd been gripping like it was mine to keep. And I know this isn't Abraham on a mountain or sacrificing someone I love. It's not even close. But from it, I think I understood. And what I actually found from the heartbreak and the questions that I couldn't answer that night was that I wasn't learning about God for her. I was learning about I was learning it for my own faith. And it just took losing something or losing her to see that clearly. Now, I honestly don't know if I was indeed being tested, but somehow it felt like everything was timed so right. Like I was supposed to be reading this chapter specifically at this moment in my life. And somehow my questions just keep getting answered as if it was written. And it's felt like that recently, like everything's being written. Anyway, I'd like to close with a poem that I wrote a while back, and it's called Blessed. Blessed am I that the sun's rays reach out to me in the shadows, that I bear witness to its light and I may see color once more. The grays have turned to the brightest reds and the deepest blues, beauty long forgotten amidst the lost hues. Blessed am I that the sun's light found me in the darkness, that it provided me a path illumined, back to a world of curiosity, awe, and wonder, a reality I'm certain I once knew. The sun has done much for me, a gentle reminder of beauty, a cause of a perspective shift, that the world isn't just riddled with regret and sadness, but filled with little things, bundles of joy if we only choose to notice. The sun has done much for me, and I am ever blessed. But it too must set. Soon it will be night. Darkness shall envelop once more. But I will not be consumed, for I now carry the sun's light with me. As my own, for I have been blessed. Thank you.